Pasi Sahlberg, Professor of Education Policy at the University of New South Wales, Sydney, prolific writer whom I follow avidly, and world thought leader on education and the future of education. I thank you so sincerely for agreeing to come on my series, Asking the Hard Questions, What Legacy Are We Leaving Our Young? It's a real privilege to talk to somebody like you and to hear your views on this critical juncture really for education and many things on the world stage.
Thank you, Teres. I'm happy to be with you.
Yeah. You originate from Finland, of course, and you've written a lot in relation to the Finnish experience. What makes the Finnish system stand out from all other Scandinavian countries and indeed from European countries and makes it an example really for the world?
I think what makes Finnish system really interesting for many outsiders is that it's so different. That it's a very different to education system, for example, in Ireland or let alone UK or here in Australia. So many people find it kind of a strange that it's entirely public system. The children and teachers spend relatively little time in the kind of a formal teaching and learning activities, and the Finnish system pays much more attention to students' well-being and happiness, of course, together with the academic subjects and issues. So many people don't kind of understand that how you can have a system like this, especially 20 years ago when the OECD started to compare these systems by measuring literacy and numeracy and science. So I think that what the Finns have done before many other systems realized is to design the system for children from the children's point of view, and it's a very kind of a not only child-centered system but child-friendly. There's a lot of play taking place throughout the system, and teachers and students relationships are very informal. It's like a home type of thing. So I think that this kind of a soft approach to whole child is something that for me is the power behind this good performance, and also the power behind this being a very different education system compared to many others.
Yeah, it bespeaks a very single-minded type of people. I'd love if Ireland could just grasp the nettle and do something similar.
Yes, I've done a lot of work in Ireland and visited a lot of schools and universities there, and there are, there's some similarities when it comes to the system. One of them is the teacher's role in the system. That in Ireland is still, many young people want to become teachers, particularly primary school teachers. There are a lot of schools in Ireland, just like in Finland, relative to the population that we both have, about the same amount, and so the school is still seen as a kind of a important place in a community, rather than like in many other places. Like here, the school is almost like a production site where you kind of stuff in a lot of people there, and then move them in the standardized way. So that's why I think the Ireland. It's an interesting question that you raised, that Ireland and Finland also have this kind of a similar cultural ethos that we have. Our history has been very much developing in the shadows of the much greater nation neighbor that has sometimes influenced in a good ways, but sometimes also in a ways that, like for us, it's been Russia in the east, and then Sweden in the west, that we have had this kind of a need to show that although we are small, but we can still be smart. And I think that the Irish system is exactly the same. That I remember my time 15 years ago when I spent 5 years at the World Bank. This was just right after the OECD PISA study evolved, and it was almost every time when I had what we call clients, governments who were interested in improving the education systems, and I asked this question: that where would you like to go and take a look at, how education is run? Very few people actually that time said Finland, because they didn't quite know where Finland is.
No, right.
But most people said Ireland. because Ireland was a kind of a well-performing and high-performing Celtic tiger there in the kind
That's
of a
right. Yeah.
So
Well,
I think we have, we have this similar type of thing, that being a small, you need to be smart, and that's what Ireland has done, and that's what Finland has done as well.
So it's something really powerful for Ireland to hold on to. That notion of the Irish system was always regarded very highly, but we really need to hold on to our standards, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that the great mistake that many countries do is to follow their much more powerful and larger neighbors. But it's interesting. You look at Ireland, you can take Canada, you can take Finland and New Zealand here, and we all say the same thing, that we have been kind of historically running after this big brother or big sister, and now we kind of realize that we will never catch them if we just try to reach the same speed, but we need to be smarter. We can be much smarter, and that's a kind of a key to being small but smart in education.
Small is beautiful, and I suppose the forces that may threaten that is this whole notion of globalization and one size fits all, which we'll come to later on in this conversation. But how important is teacher training to education into the future? I note that you have a system whereby teachers study up to master's level, and it may go on for over 5 years. And is this an ingredient that we should emulate here in Ireland?
Yeah, teacher education is, of course, extremely important, but it's often important in a different ways that people think, because often the conversation about teacher education is about how much knowledge and skills teachers actually need, for example, to teach in a primary school. And I have had these conversations in Ireland many times. But what Finland is actually showing is that the other important thing is that you need to have teacher education that is attractive enough and ambitious enough, so that those young people who would otherwise go to study medicine or law or business or something would consider teaching as a profession, because it also provides them a research-based degree. And so this is what we try to tell in Finland, is that one thing is that this 5-year research-based master's degree for primary school teachers, of course, provides and prepares teachers to work in different ways. But then the other thing is that being a higher level advanced academic degree will also attract more people, young people who just want to have a higher degree, and maybe at some point of their life want to do something else. So that's why if we downgrade the teaching degrees, let's say in most countries it's a bachelor's degree, and there are still countries that prepare primary school teachers in colleges and seminars. That it's obvious that if you have a young person who have more abilities and talent and skills academically and socially as well, that they would say that I would love to be a teacher, but it's not really a competitive degree, so that's why I go to study something else. So I think we need to carefully think about this issue, but the whole teacher education is important. And in many ways, Ireland, I've done a lot of work there in teacher education in Ireland during the last 10 years, and there are a lot of good things, kind of a strong points in the Irish way of thinking about how teachers are prepared. One of the big differences that we have between Finland and Ireland is that we have this teaching schools attached to the universities in Finland, just like you have your teaching hospitals, and that's one thing that makes kind of elevates the initial teacher education to the not only to kind of academic level of training, but also clinical training.
Practical.
So this is something that I have been talking about often in Ireland, is that why not now, when you have these clusters of teacher education throughout the country, why not try to see if the school could be a place, kind of a university-based school could be a place for clinical initial teacher practice in Ireland that would probably elevate the initial teacher education in Ireland to the next level.
Well, we added a 4th year to our B.Ed program, which became very much site-based, where the student went and did a lot of practice in the schools. But it's all about attracting quality people into the profession and holding on to them, isn't it?
Yes, but I don't belong to those who thinks that there would be a kind of a universal link between academic ability of young people and being a good teacher. And this is what we try to do in Finland as well, is to see the teaching profession much broader issue than just being academically smart. And there's actually a lot of evidence in research that shows that your academic abilities don't necessarily predict being a good teacher. I'm a living example of that. I was a mathematics and science teacher for many years, and I was not, I always loved mathematics and science, but I would never consider myself as a brilliant, talented, or gifted in mathematics, because what happens often, and mathematics is a good example, but it applies to many other things in teaching, is that if you have to struggle, like I really had to work hard to get some of my mathematics done at school, but also at the university. I really understood those kids in my classroom who said, "Teacher, I cannot do this. I don't understand this." I knew exactly how they felt. But just think about somebody who's like a naturally talented in mathematics and never had to struggle with anything, and then somebody says that, "Teacher, I don't understand this." This person wouldn't have this experience of I don't know how it feels when somebody says that I don't know this. So that's why I think it's important to, when we look at the prospective good future teachers, to look at many other aspects like this, again, the holistic person, like yes, personality and empathy, and
the empathy. I was going to say the emotional, the emotional intelligence. Yeah.
Exactly.
So you seem, in Finland, the teachers seem to have a lot of autonomy, really, and trust seems to be the driver. I often think that perhaps that level of trust is absent in Ireland somewhat. What can we learn from you in terms of the trust you invest in your teachers, and you see them as the experts, they've been trained, their ongoing journey of learning is underway, and you trust them as the experts?
Yes, again, it all starts with this strong professional base in the teaching profession. You're going to trust or give autonomy to people who, if there's any doubt that they are not able to do this. And that's, when I went to teaching in my first few years as a teacher, I had this very strong feeling, similar to what my colleagues, young teachers, had, that nobody trusts our ability to judge anything in the school, that everything was kind of a given, and then there was an inspection and control, that you do what you were supposed to do. And we were telling the government and authorities that just let us figure out the better ways and we can give you better results. But that was only possible after we had a kind of a adequate academic training behind us, and that's why I never would recommend anybody, including Ireland, to do something that let's just announce. Let's have a minister or authority in Ireland who will announce that from next year we will trust everyone and you will have all this autonomy. It has to come in school. It has to come with the concrete things like.
Yeah.
The inspection system is something that is a very kind of an Anglo-Saxon old tradition in Scotland and England. It's the same, it's in Ireland, same thing, that this inspectorate, just think about this inspection. And, we had an inspectorate until 1991. And just think about this as part of the system of education. And if the inspection function is not kind of a properly organized, it's kind of eating away this, much of this trust base that was there. And I remember, I was just moved from school, being a teacher in a school, to work in a Department of Education or Ministry of Education in Finland that time, when the inspectorate was abolished. Right. And the first reaction I remember as a young inspector in the ministry, that I heard people, my former colleagues and principals, saying that, so are you sure that you trust us in a way that that you are not anymore controlling what we do? And said, yeah, we are not controlling what you do. You have to learn to do that yourself.
Yes, that was a real statement, wasn't it? A real statement of trust. Yeah,
exactly. And some other things, like we stopped controlling teaching the textbooks and materials for schools, saying that use your own professional judgment and think about what is the best textbook or material to use, rather than ask the authorities what is the can we do this or that. So my point here is, Teresa, that people need to do kind of a real things and show the teachers and schools that we trust you in this particular judgment and decision.
Yeah,
do it
very empowering, very empowering.
Yeah, exactly.
I could see that working very much, that whole thing. And it would do the world of good for teachers' self-efficacy and for their whole sense of pride in what they do, etc. Yeah. So every crisis offers an opportunity. And we've just, I suppose, for you in Sydney, you're still mid-crisis, and we hope we'll see the end of this crisis soon. So we've dreamed of transformed education, rethought schools, or reimagined learning. Is this the time to actually work on change? Is it a golden opportunity that every nation should now grasp? Because the methods used in the past, the traditional methods, will no longer serve us in the future.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes people say that it was Winston Churchill who said that we should never let a good crisis go to waste, and that's probably the most used kind of a adage in these days. And I think what this crisis is really doing is that it's allowing us to think differently and also look back. I think one of the significant things for me is that if I look at education globally, I'm not talking about Ireland or Finland only, but education in general, that during the last 20 years, we have been spending more money in education in different ways. We have tried all kinds of innovation and different types of reforms. Just look at England, for example. England is a good example of that, or the United States. But at the same time, we have seen declining learning outcomes across the board. And the other thing that we have seen also, and this was far before the pandemic, was the gap between the most disadvantaged students and most affluent students in the school systems in general. The gap was widening. So, I think that this crisis is helping us to really ask this hard question that what are we doing wrong? Why this has been happening before the pandemic, and what the pandemic has done is just kind of amplified these things, that we see these inequalities more clearly, and we see the kind of the issues and challenges that this traditional school system has had in many countries more clearly now than before. And so I think that if there's one thing that we need to think again, is this very painful and complicated issue of having these deeply rooted inequalities in all the systems, that why these education systems are not able to provide good and adequate education for every child. Yeah. Why we have been kind of accepting and being silent with these huge achievement gaps and disparities in educational achievement for the last 20 years. We have known this thing, that maybe this crisis is now helping us to really think again what a more equal and fair school system would look like. I don't think that it's going to be easy and fast, but I can see that there's probably more focus in the post-pandemic to this particular issue, that how do we make sure that each and every child really would get a kind of a good education that will help her or him to be successful in life.
In focusing direction, what are the key questions that the change makers in Ireland, for instance, should be asking at this critical juncture? It's only through asking questions that we actually cause people to stop dead in their tracks and to think. Teachers have shown how versatile they are. They literally pivoted overnight to online teaching and learning. And they did it brilliantly. I don't really believe that they were applauded enough here in Ireland for the job they did. Some schools obviously did better than others, but it showed them their capability and what they can do under pressure. It showed them the level of resilience that they have as professionals. So the change makers, what questions should they be asking in order to evoke change now?
Yeah, I think it's just like you said yourself, Teresa, that this recognition that schools were actually doing quite well, this huge transition. Before the pandemic, people said that schools change very slowly, and sometimes the change, the way schools work, particularly when it comes to teaching and learning, is impossible. But just take a look at this. In a matter of few months, schools in Ireland and Finland and here basically turned everything upside down in how they teach and help kids to learn. That if we take this notion seriously and just go back to this trust issue, that maybe we can trust more schools' own judgment and ways of realizing and finding best ways to make sure that all these children can learn. That maybe it's a better way than believing that the government or the authorities will figure out the best curriculum and best way to assess and inspect and do all these things. Let's trust a little bit more the school's judgment to do this. But then I want to bring another aspect here, that is, I can see that this will be one of these emerging themes within the next 12 to 24 months as we go into this what will hopefully be a post-pandemic period.
Sure.
The other realization will be that the children in most countries have been actually extremely resilient in this situation. You remember a year ago when the pandemic was kind of just beginning, there was the Economist and McKinsey and many others were saying that how much the kids have left behind, and all this learning loss in the school, and all these gloomy pictures that if this continues for a year, there will be huge losses in lifetime earnings and many other things. But now, for example, here we had in Australia the first national assessment results since the kind of a pre-pandemic things. And the unbelievable thing was that the kids in many states here actually were doing better.
Wow! So the forms of learning, yeah.
So, and this is kind of how can it be that these kids are actually learning more when the whole world and schools have been closed and they have been in a lockdown and their parents have been unemployed and many other things, but the kids actually show that they learn better, and that's for me it's nothing surprising. It's kind of a natural way of the human resilience. Particularly, children are really good in that when they really have to put their best in showing what they can do, what they have done, they're able to do that. And if we realize this very unique feature of children, of their being resilient when the time comes to do that, maybe the other notion, together with this trusting teachers and schools, will be that maybe these kids have much more capacity within them than we have actually realized. And maybe this way that we have done until now, by asking them to sit in a classroom and do the homework and go with the same pace, is not necessarily the best way. Maybe we should have more diverse way of helping kids to learn, and maybe we should ask them a little bit more often that how you want to do this, and what is your natural way of learning. So in this sense, I'm very hopeful that we will this crisis will kind of expose some of these new understandings of what is this, you call it a total human capital, that what is this kind of a power of this human capacity and capital in people, when they really have to show that
What do you see as the pros and cons of screen usage among children in terms of their ability to do deep learning and recall? Does it hinder their deep learning and their ability to recall because of the flexibility and the availability of information on screen?
This is one of my main research works here is called Growing Up digital here in Australia that I do with my American Canadian colleagues, and we are looking at exactly this issue there. And again, the one notion is that we need to be very careful in using a kind of a generalized ways of what teachers do, what kids do, because it's so different. Individuals have a very different ways of using the technology for teaching and learning. But overall, you mentioned the deeper learning. I think what we hear in our research, most teachers saying that when the teaching is focusing on inquiry-based or problem-based learning, project work, or communicating your learning outcomes, that the technology is superior in that way, but because it's providing these things. But then on the other side, I think this the negative problematic thing is that what happens when young people are engaged too much with the technology. And because we as a researchers, we often ask these questions that rather than looking at how many hours or minutes young people spend with their devices or gadgets, the more interesting question is that what are they not doing when they are when they're engaged with this? And, and it's often sleep is extremely important thing, and we know from your country and mine that the amount of quality sleep that young people, particularly teenagers, get daily has declined, and that has a direct connection to the deeper learning thing. If you're tired, if you're not able to focus on thing or concentrate, you cannot learn, kind of exercise deeper learning.
Teachers these days all report that children's attention span seems to be shorter, and you favor teach less, learn more approach. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and how maybe the use of technology can complement that whole thinking of teaching less but learning more?
Yeah, I think that this teach less, learn more, that is a kind of a paradox that we have noticed in Finland, but it's also interestingly, it's one of those labels that describe this Singaporean way of education that people often don't kind of immediately associate to that. But because we know that there's actually the link between teaching and learning is quite weak, unlike people believe. Most people think that more you teach children, the more they learn, but the evidence is not showing that. It actually shows the opposite, that the more we try to kind of impose instruction and material and knowledge to kids, the less they actually learn. So that's why this, again, going back to this Finnish model thing, is that Finland is not, as I said earlier, that Finland is known as a country that has relatively less compulsory instruction time required for kids, but still the outcomes are often better than in many other countries, which indicates the kind of provides evidence for this teach less and learn more. But it also makes a common sense that if you're teaching pedagogical philosophy is based on idea that I cannot teach my children everything, but I can give them something that will kind of try to wake up their curiosity and interest and motivation to do this thing. And then I just let them go. Just like a good parenting is the same thing, that you cannot shape your children to what you want them to be. They will become what they want to be themselves. And that's why the kind of a good parenting, it's the same thing, that you give your children, you give them love and protection and ideas and support, and then say that grow up and go and do these things. It's a similar thing in pedagogy as well, that rather than trying to control the entire pedagogical process by teaching and deciding what the kids need to learn. I think this is what the Finnish pedagogy, if there's anything like that, is based on, is that let's have a good start with the students and let's show them the way and lead them away a little bit, and then some kids need a little bit more protection and hand holding, whereas some others are ready to go from the kind of immediate point. And that's where the kind of art of good learning is. That if you're able to do that, then you get different results. I think the one thing that we need to keep in mind is that, this technology that we have around us is going to be here anyway. Whether we teach children in the school with the technology or not, and it's more important to make sure that all these young people, they understand what this technology is all about, what is it good for, and what are the kind of risks and dangers that comes with that. So I would, rather than go into this extreme of kind of a thinking that, well, let's keep everything, all the gadgets and things away from kids in school and at home until they are old enough to understand, like 12 or 13. And my research is supporting this as well, that I would rather like to find a way where the kids, when they grow up into this world of technology, that they see this as a natural thing around them. And the parenting and education in the school should then focus more on, making sure that everybody understands the ingredients of what is often called digital well-being or digital wellness.
So there's a real case there for teaching digital literacy, isn't there?
Yes, but I would rather talk about digital wellness than literacy, because it's you need to learn these rules of well-being first before literacy, and that's a kind of a mistake that often happens, is that we rush into this literacy thing and bring all these technologies and things around the kids in the school and say that this is what it means and this is how you use these things, without really helping everybody to understand that what is the basis of digital well-being. And that's I would personally like to start from that notion, and then when the young people are kind of learning into this idea of wellness, digital wellness, which includes things like learning how to switch off the device when it's necessary, or leaving your smartphone to a different room, not to take it with your bedroom or something like this. That you do those. The kids should be able to do those things because they understand themselves why to do that, rather than somebody else go and tell them.
Do you find in your studies, have standards of education improved or disimproved at the hands of technology, or is it too early to say?
No, it's not too early to say, and this is my research is not really directly looking at this what has happened to the quality of education outcomes, but there's an interesting probably the largest study that has been done using a global data that was done by the OECD a few years ago, and the OECD's conclusion was basically that the more technology is used for teaching in schools, particularly mathematics and science, the worse the outcomes were. So the conclusion that time, but it's already a few years old, but the answer to your question based on that study was that using technology for instruction in school is not improving the outcomes, and it may be because the teachers and students have not developed yet the good enough skills and attitudes how to teach and learn with these devices, but there must be something else there as well. But what we can see in our study is that there seems to be a correlation between the ways in which young people use their own digital devices, typically a smartphone, and how well they are going or doing in the school. Again, I'm saying correlation, not causation, but
yes.
but the typical notion is that the more young people spend time on screens of different types, whether it's a gaming or social media or TV, whatever it is, the more likely they are experiencing difficulties and struggle educationally in school. But again, we have
by
to be.
The same token, obviously, the young entering the workforce have grown up with technology, and the use of the interactive whiteboard in some classes, teachers really have become dependent on it. And one of my clients recently reported that broadband went down in her school and she wasn't even aware that it had gone down when she had 4 young teachers up to her door saying, "I can't teach, the interactive whiteboard is gone." So there's that danger there, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it often happens with these new devices and gadgets anyway. That's when you get your first iPad, you tend to do like everything with that. When you get your first whiteboard in your classroom, you try to do everything with that. And you know, that may be behind also this fact that technology until now has not yet been able to, you know, improve the traditional outcomes of education. And it may be because of exactly this thing that, you know, when the technology arrived here, we tried to do everything with that, and it takes it's a little bit the same as with the, you know, when the automobiles arrived in the early 20th century, or, you know, cigarette smoking. It's not so long ago when, you know, everybody was smoking everywhere because there were no kind of rules. And it's the same with this technological thing that, you know, people try to do everything. Until, you know, we realize that, you know, there's, you know, some things are not really that smart, some, you know, some harm can be done, and we need to learn to, you know, do this in a different ways. But, you know, again, going back to this pandemic thing, Teresa, you were asking about what we can learn from this crisis. I think, you know, one thing that many people will realize, including young people, that, you know, spending days in and out in front of the screens and doing Google Classrooms and those things, it's not really a good fun. I want to have like a real people to talk to at some point. So, you know, when the people are at some point, when they are really like a permanently back to school face to face, I think that there are many more people, including teachers, who realize that, you know, the real teaching actually is more fun when we are all having these conversations and then use, you know, ask this question that how the technology can help us to do these things. But you know, these ideas that we can replace teachers and we can more effectively educate kids by using the, you know, online and remote and these blended systems. I think there are many people who will think again after this experience and this experiment. Absolutely. That, you know, what exactly do we need?
So there's a real case going forward, though, for recognition of the importance of interaction, the importance of play for our children, the importance of this learning the social niceties of interaction, etc. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, absolutely. And that's, you know, that's one of those things that, again, in our research and our colleague studies have become clear that, you know, this time with the technology, this increasing time with your own individual devices has been time away from social interaction and this real connection. There has been a clear decline in empathy, for example, in North American studies. So clearly that's the young people who have been growing up with this kind of a digital lifestyle, they show much less empathy than before. And that's
worry, yeah.
Yeah, that's you know, that's one of those. All this empathy probably gets kind of a different shapes, but you know, we need to be aware of these things, particularly the social interaction and how people relate to one another and experience one another's company in this world.
So that we've come to the point now, post-pandemic, of deciding whether it's going to be returned to the office, hybrid working, or working from home. And I argue that depending on where you're at in your life, really, it's better to return to interaction with your peers and with your colleagues in the workplace, that it's healthier. And particularly for youngsters in their 20s, it's quite isolating and alienating to be working from their home base without that interaction. If you consider the building of a culture in a workplace, I don't see that the culture of a workplace can thrive in the hybrid setting. Do you?
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult and very hard. But again, I think that this 1.5, 2 years that we have been living in a very different life will also show this, what you were saying, concretely to many people, that we will kind of think again about this, you know, this value of social human interaction.
Great reset. It's really one huge social experiment. I mean, psychologists will have a heyday after this in carrying out studies. But the OECD were quoted by the World Economic Forum in January in relation to the future scenarios for schooling and the notion of schooling extended, education outsourced, schools as learning hubs. And then the one that really caught my eye was learning as you go. Education takes place everywhere, anytime. Distinctions between formal and informal learning are no longer valid as society turns itself entirely to the power of the machine. What do you make of that?
It's interesting that you asked that, because you know, my first response is that there's nothing new in this. That is what the OECD and World Economic Forum has done. You know, these same scenarios, they have been around already for 20 or 30 years. And so we have been kind of try to predict a long time, you know, how the schools are going to evolve. But, you know, my view, again, and this goes back to what we spoke earlier, is that this value of human relationships, and not only relationships between the teacher and the student in the school or university, but also these extremely important social bonds and connections between students and students is going to be it's going to be more valuable and important than we probably realize. And I think that, you know, some of these scenarios will need to be reconsidered after the pandemic. I think that many people, including many parents, realize that how important function school actually has, just by, you know, having these people there together every day and learning to live together, not just, you know, learn there together, but, you know, learn to live together, be together, and understand, you know, differences. And that's why, you know, we can speculate about this, you know, learning happens everywhere, or learning will be disrupted, or, you know, there will be no schools. And you know, of course, we also know that, you know, people have always been learning all the time as you go. That, you know, there's nothing new in that.
It's not a new construct.
But I think that what's the kind of a challenge for formal education systems in the future is that, you know, how can we make sure that this line between formal education and informal education or non-formal education will be kind of a lower than before. But again, you know, this is something that the European Union, for example, has been working on this for the last 30 years, this recognizing non-formal and informal education as part of this like a real learning. So I think that there's a little bit of this kind of a fashionable intellectual, you know, tinkering in the OECDs and these international organizations work. I'm not saying that it would be completely without value or meaning. I think it's good to do these things, but you know, predicting future now is more difficult than ever before. For example, we don't know exactly how the artificial intelligence and this machine learning will eventually change the way we perceive and deliver education. It may be, you know, one thing is that it may be that it will basically individualize and personalize everything, and that the role of the school will be less than before. But it may also be, if some other things happens in a society or workplace, for example, that the role of the kind of a traditional school, if you wish, will become more important.
Sure, and that's a lovely twist on it. Yeah.
Also, you know, if educators or parents or community has some opinion on this, like if we really want to have a place for our children where they can go safely every day and meet other kids and learn about life and learn about themselves through people, then we have to talk about that. Not just, you know, the scary thing with this is that we just wait and let's wait and see what happens, because then the funny things can happen if we just take this attitude that let's see what the future brings.
So maybe we need to move away from the top-down edicts from government and listen to what local community has to say and work towards what blends with the school being part of community and serving the needs of community.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, the most important stakeholders in this listening to the community are the young people, children themselves. You know, they have been, until now, in most countries, young people have almost completely been excluded in this conversation.
Absolutely.
And just like if you look at the global movement for the climate change action, it's led by young people now. Many of these government things that now will be discussed later this year in Glasgow, Scotland, they would not be in the agendas of these global meetings without young people. And I think that if we were just listening more and engaging, including young people more into these conversations of what type of school do they really need, not just what they want, but what type of things they need.
Millennials, Gen Z and Gen Alpha are going to make up 70% of the workforce by 2029. And the point you make about we don't listen to their opinion, they're not included in the debate, is very important. It's a stark figure. 70% of the workforce by 2029 is going to be made up of those people who are not asked for their opinion.
Yeah. So that's why it's very important.
What is a decent education for the world of tomorrow?
Yeah, it's again a good question, and I think different people may use different labels and terms. What I have used in my writings and my work is adequacy or adequate education. That's a kind of a similar thing that basically, if you turn it to the question that what is adequate education at the individual level. So of course it means that the school and society overall is offering people education, knowledge and skills and some other things that are relevant for them, that they need in their lives, so that they can have a happy and good life, and of their own willing. And this has been often a kind of, and still continues to be a kind of a handicap in our thinking, is that we kind of believe that there's a kind of an authority or somebody who will decide what type of education and knowledge and things every young person needs. I'm accepting that there's a kind of a common core that everybody, we all need to be able to read and do basic arithmetic and some other things. But beyond that, this adequate education or decent education, if you wish, means that we have to again ask these young people that what makes your life, what do you think makes your life like a good or worthwhile? What are those things that you need? It basically goes back to this, what Sir Ken Robinson, who was a very close and good friend of mine and really great friend of Ireland. His wife is from Dublin. He always used to say about the same thing, that we need to help young people more to not only to learn about the world around them, but also realize the world within them. And this is at the heart of this adequate.
But do many nations run the risk of that gap widening, that canyon, as you refer to in your writing, between the haves and the have-nots? Let's say those who are able to access the decent education, those who can number among the highly skilled, and those who will actually be left behind due to lack of capability on technology, etc. There's a rise in special needs as well, that really every nation is experiencing. Will there be a major gap between those who will thrive in the future and those who will be left behind?
Yeah, but this gap and the notion of more people left behind is primarily because we have and continue to have this kind of a standardized mindset for education, that we kind of assume that each and everyone will learn not only the same things but in the same ways. Yes. And then we are measuring these expected outcomes also in exactly the kind of a standardized way. And we continue to see these gaps, and this canyon is going to get wider if we continue to do that, because one thing that the technology is doing is helping young people at a very early age to choose their own pathway. There are many young people who kind of have their first job when they're 9, they're developing things and doing things. And just think about, putting somebody like that in this format of the traditional schooling, where basically the school says that, it doesn't matter what you do at home or on your free time. It's a school where you have to do what everybody else is doing. And, those people will not they will drop out or do some other things, which means that we continue to see this wider gap in these achievements in the end. So that's why it's so important to kind of individualize and again move towards this adequate education. Take it serious, though, decent education, which, if we did that one, if we were in the school systems asking more often and more seriously that what these young people are really interested in doing, what do you want to do with your life? I'm not saying that you should ask this question from an 8-year-old or 10-year-old, but when the kids are kind of beginning to understand who they are, what they want to do, and then ask themselves, the educators, the schools, and the system, that how should we design or redesign or reimagine the school so that all these different people would be able to follow their passion and fulfill their lives, and then measure these outcomes also in a different way, that we would actually not see the widening canyon of achievement, but we would see narrowing these gaps, because people would be able to demonstrate and show what they have learned and their progress in a different way. So that's
really an appreciation of individual difference, and it's grasping the liberalization that technology offers away from the traditional methods you're talking about, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's the interesting thing is that there are some schools that have already done things like this. There maybe must be schools in Ireland. There are certainly schools here in Australia, many schools in Finland that are already designed in this way, that they kind of start by understanding these young people in a very different way. And that's the point, that unless we understand children differently, we are not able to change the schools in a ways that they should change. So everything starts with this kind of a notion that we need to understand children and their capabilities and capacity and potential in a different ways, and then
bring it right back to teacher education, back into teacher education. Yeah. So the final question: what legacy are we leaving our young? A highway to prosperity, or a maze navigated only by the highly capable?
The life is life should be a journey, and to navigate through a storm or disruption means that you need to have skills to learn, and that you must be able to seize the moment and time. Yeah, so I think that this may be a good closing for this conversation, is that this pandemic and this crisis that we are still living in may be a kind of a good lesson for us also regarding this question, because this is not going to be the last. This is not going to be the last disruption or pandemic or crisis that we have globally. Particularly these children that you were talking about earlier, that they will go through a number of similar global disruptions, and the good question is that what type of legacy would help them make sure that they will be able to survive and find the best ways to help themselves and help one another when the time comes that they really are challenged to find a new way. But again, and in the end, I want to also kind of remind us all that young people have this resilient part of themselves, that they are capable to do much more than we actually give them credit for. And that's a kind of a thing that I always think about as part of this legacy question, is that we just should trust more what the young people themselves are able to do, and just let them lead many of these things.
Optimism. We need to be optimistic, role model optimism, and we will survive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's where my optimism in this situation, whether it's education or future of the world, almost entirely comes from young people. It doesn't come from the current governments or scientists or all of it. It's about their ability to find a way if we just let them do that. And school is the right place to start to do that more than we have done so far.
It has been lovely, lovely having this conversation with you.
Thank you, Teresa, and I really appreciate what Irish people have been able to accomplish, and I'm always available for conversations with anyone from your beautiful country.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Best of luck.